Hello everybody and welcome back to Nerdy Miniatures, and in today's video we'll be starting our series on the Warcry Crypt of Blood starter set. This video will focus on how we painted the good campaign of the set, known as Xandire's Truthseekers, and then next week we'll be talking about the evil side, known as the Crimson Court. Once we have shown you the full set, we'll wrap up the series with a review of the overall complete set. We have a lot to uncover, so let's get on with the video. So let's start by looking at the good campaign. Xandire's Truthseekers are a warband of Stormcast Eternals within the Warhammer Underworld setting, specifically Thunderstrike armoured Stormcast Eternals and their Etherwing companion. They are led by Calthia Xandire, who is a wizard and leader within the warband. This group is tasked with carrying out quests by the God King Sigmar. So, to complete their mission, these heroes first must look the part. So let's begin by painting Taros, the hunting bird companion of hero Luxa Stormrider. To begin, I painted the bird's chests and lower wing section using the colour Eshin Grey to create a subtle bit of colour. This isn't super noticeable now, but once I start adding other colours it will make it look a bit better. Whilst that dried, I painted the tree that he stood on. So to do this, I applied the colour Dryad Bark and swept it over the figure in layers, letting it dry down. Whilst that dried, I painted the base using the colour Eshin Grey. At this point the bird was dry, so it was time to do this with our next colour. Using the colour Kantor Blue, I painted the second layer of wings on the bird to begin the process of gradually brightening up the creature. For the outermost wings, I mixed that same blue with Abaddon Black to create a deep navy. Moving on to his beak and claws, I applied the colour Avalanche Sunset to make sure this stood out against this very blue bird. Going back to the tree, using the colour Gortha Brown and a dry brush, I swept the colour over the tree to add subtle highlights. To begin showing off the feathers, I mixed Eshin Grey in some water and then swept it over the chest of the bird like a wash, allowing it to sink into the crevices to highlight it. Using the colour Russ Grey, I picked out feathers and highlighted them. Then using Kantor Blue, I highlighted some of the darker feathers using the same technique. That is it for Taros. Now we're moving on to the leader of the group, Calthia Xandire. So we're starting with her cape. To do this, I used some Kantor Blue and applied multiple coats until it was fully covered. There will be a reoccurring theme because all these Stormcasts look basically exactly the same, so I will be repeating myself a lot, just fair warning. As there is a small amount of skin showing, I had to dip back into my tried and true Gulliman Flesh to sweep a light coat over her face and neck, ready for me to add more tones later. These tones are Reikland Fleshshade and Kislev Flesh. I do this off camera. Next it was time to move on to the armour. Using the colour Liberator Gold, I covered most of the rest of the figure. For her hands and the back of her legs that were not covered by this glorious gold armour, I went in with Eshin Grey and also applied this to the rim of her boots as well. Around her waist sits a skirt of chainmail, so to break up that gold a little bit, I went in with Iron Hand Steel and covered the chainmail with that. I also applied the same colour to the lantern she holds. Holding on various weapons and other assortments to this hero are various leather straps. To achieve this look, I went in with Mournfang Brown and that same silver as before to cover any buckles and clasps. On her side are various containers, so I painted these using Xandire dust. Now it was time to start dry brushing. Using the colour Russ Grey, I swept a small amount of the colour over the back of her cape. I did end up going in with the light wash of Kantor Blue, but the highlights still shined through, so it added the perfect amount of dimension. Over the figure, I then dry brushed Iron Hand Steel over the rest of the figure. To subdue the brightness on this very metallic figure, I washed the armour over with the colours Nuln Oil and Reikland Fleshshade, to give the metal a dirty, slightly tarnished look. Using the shade Eshin Grey, I then painted the base of the figure. I went over the top with Nuln Oil to highlight each cobblestone and highlighted certain ones using Grey Seer and Eshin Grey mixed together. Now to finish her off, added some light to her lantern. For this I used Avalan Sunset and Astaroth Red to create a glowing light effect coming from deep inside the lantern. We are officially halfway through our warband, so let's move on to our archer. We are looking at the human companion of Taros, Luxa Stormrider this time. Just like Calthia, I painted Luxa's cape with the same shade of Kantor Blue, which I built up in layers until I was happy with the finished product. Moving on to her armour, I used the same shade of Liberator Gold, sweeping it all over her armour and the helmet that covers her face. I then used Eshin Grey to cover the back of her legs and other parts of the body that the armour isn't covering, such as her gloves. Now let's have a look at Luxa's weapon of choice, which is her bow. For this I used the shade Leadbelcher to cover the weapon. I did 2 coats on this in the end to make sure the weapon was fully covered. I then ended up picking out small parts which I went over with Retributor armour and Liberator Gold mixed together to just really make them pop. Whilst that dried, I moved on to her satchel as well as the straps that wrap around her body. For this I used Mournfang Brown to break up this very gold figure. Whilst that dried, I dry brushed the back of Luxa's cape using the shade Russ Grey. Just like before, I wanted the character to look a little bit grungier, so I went in with Nuln Oil and Reikland Flesh, sweeping it over the entire figure to add a grubby look to the overall finish. Now we move on to our final member of the Good campaign, Dhoraz Giantfell. I hope I'm saying that right. This humongous man will be paired with the same colour as other previous characters, but unlike his other counterparts, he'll also be painting his luscious locks as well. For the last time today, I used the shade Kantor Blue to cover the front and underside of Dhoraz's cape, making sure it was fully covered. Covering the top of Dhoraz's legs is the lower half of the tunic he wears, so to paint this I used Eshin Grey, also applying it to any other exposed spots on the model. You guys know the drill by now. For the armour, we're using the star of the show, Liberator Gold, to cover his remaining armour. For the straps on his body, as well as the leather strap that wraps around the weapon, I applied Mournfang Brown, allowing it to dry. Now let's take a little look at his weapon of choice, his hammer. For this, I covered the rest of the remaining weapon using Iron Hand Steel, applying 2 coats to make sure it was fully covered. I shaded the entire figure using Reikland Flesh before moving on to his hair. For his hair, I wanted to create the perfect aged locks look, so to do this I covered them using a base shade of Eshin Grey. I then went in with some Nuln Oil over top to highlight any crevices. Whilst that dried, I moved on to highlight the back of his cape using Russ Grey, highlighting every crease and fold in the fabric. Off camera, I painted all the bases using Eshin Grey before layering green shades on each base, giving the impression of moss and grass peeking out from between the cobblestones. And that is it. That is the end of this video. Next week we'll be painting the evil warband of this set. So if you want to see how that looks, then be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that. Down in the description below, you'll find 2 links. The first to Mr. Nerd's channel. So if you enjoy MMOs and action RPGs, then please feel free to look at that. If you enjoy fantasy lore on topics like Tolkien, Warhammer and The Witcher, then you might want to have a look at my channel. Anyway, that'll be it from me today. Have a wonderful day or night, wherever you are in the world. And as always, peace out.